The Queen's offer. On the planet Zerexa, far away from Earth, there was a palace so big it touched the clouds. Its walls were made of glowing blue crystal, and its towers hummed with strange energy. Inside that palace sat Queen Valin, ruler of the Zerexan Empire, a proud and powerful alien queen feared across the galaxy. She ruled with beauty, strength, and a very old tradition. Every 1,000 cycles, she had to choose a mate. Not for love, but for genetics. She was expected to sign a reproductive contract with the strongest male across the stars. He would help her produce the next royal heir. For her people, it was just science. Feelings did not matter. Choice did not matter. This time they brought her a human. His name was Daniel Kane. He was tall, quiet, and had calm eyes. He didn't dress like a warrior, and he didn't carry a weapon. He stood straight in the royal hall while alien lords and noble scientists stared at him like he was a weak animal. Whispers filled the room. He's from Earth? Humans are emotional, soft. Why not a Krenak gladiator instead? Queen Valin stepped down from her throne holding a silver contract in her long clawed fingers. Her skin shimmered like moonlight and her eyes burned violet. Her voice was smooth but sharp like a blade. "You are the human they sent?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes, Your Highness. You are here to serve. This contract contains your duties. You will stay in the Eastern Wing. Your genetics will be sampled. You will dine alone. You will speak only when spoken to. You will not leave the palace unless called. Sign it." She stretched out the contract. The room fell silent. Daniel didn't move. Instead, he looked around at the staring eyes, the cold faces, and finally, back at the Queen. "Is that all I am to you?" he asked. "A tool? A signature?" A flicker of surprise moved across her perfect face. "You are here to serve the Empire. Your genetics are strong. That is all that is needed." Daniel stepped forward slowly. The guards reached for their weapons, but Valin raised her hand to stop them. He looked down at the contract. Thick lines of alien text glowed across the silver paper. It might as well have been a prison sentence. He took the contract with both hands. Everyone watched, expecting him to kneel. Instead, he tore it in half. Gasps filled the hall. One noble dropped his drink. Another shouted, "He destroyed the sacred agreement." The Queen stood frozen, her hand still stretched out. She looked at the shredded paper like it was a broken crown. Daniel's voice was steady. "I don't belong to anyone. If you want my help, ask me like a person, not like an object." Valin's eyes narrowed. "You dare insult the Zerexan crown? You shame me in my own palace?" Daniel shrugged. "No shame. Just honesty." Guards moved forward again, this time faster, weapons humming. "Stand down," Valin ordered sharply. The guard stopped, confused. She walked closer to Daniel, now only a few steps away. He didn't flinch. "You are bold, human, or foolish. Do you think your strength means anything here? Maybe not. But respect does." Valin studied him. Her whole life no one had ever refused her. She could have crushed him with a word, sent him to the pits, or ended his visit right there. Instead, she turned to her council and said, "Leave us." Reluctantly, the nobles and guards left the room. The heavy doors shut behind them with a deep echo. She looked at him again, more curious now than angry. "Why did you really come here, Daniel?" she asked. He replied, "To represent Earth, not to become property." "Then you knew what we were offering." "I did, and I hoped you'd be different." Valin tilted her head. "You thought I would fall in love with you?" "No," he smiled. "I thought maybe you'd want a partner, not a prisoner." She stared at him for a long moment, then walked back to her throne and sat down, tapping one claw against the armrest. "Leave this hall," she said softly. "But you are not free yet." Daniel bowed slightly, not in fear, but in respect, and walked away. As the doors closed behind him, Queen Valin whispered to herself, "We will see how long your pride lasts, human." But inside her mind, a new feeling began to grow, one she hadn't felt in years. Doubt, to be continued. The palace erupts. The Xerexan palace was no longer calm. News of the human tearing the queen's sacred contract spread like fire. Within an hour, it had reached every wing of the Crystal Palace and echoed across the planetary networks. Servants whispered in corridors. Soldiers tightened their grips on plasma rifles. Nobles sent urgent messages back to their home planets. A human had refused the queen. Worse, he had destroyed the ancient reproductive contract, and he still walked free. Inside the queen's private chamber, High Command sat in an emergency session. 12 powerful advisors, some warriors, others scientists, and a few political lords, sat around a long obsidian table. Queen Valen stood. At the head, her arms crossed, her violet eyes colder than ever. "He must be punished," said Lord Krenos, a scarred general. "If we let this stand, the entire empire will question your command." "He's clever," said Sora, the queen's chief intelligence officer. "He didn't attack, he didn't insult your bloodline, he simply refused, and that makes him dangerous." Valen stayed silent. "Your Majesty," said one of the elders, "if you show mercy, it will be seen as weakness. The Xerexan Empire is built on tradition, on obedience. We cannot allow—" "Enough," Valen said sharply, raising her hand. The room fell silent. She walked slowly to the wide window behind her. Outside, the glowing towers of her capital city rose against the twin moons. It was beautiful, but tonight it felt cold. "I summoned him here," she said quietly. "I expected another desperate male eager to serve. Instead, I found a human with no fear in his voice." "Arrogance," muttered Krenos. "No," she corrected. "Conviction." A long silence followed. "Still," she added, "he must learn respect." Meanwhile, Daniel stood in a quiet garden deep within the palace walls. Tall blue plants glowed in the moonlight. Small flying orbs buzzed gently above the flowers. But he wasn't alone. Commander Thalra, the queen's top military strategist, approached him. She was 7 feet tall, armored in silver and green, with sharp eyes and long braided hair that flickered with electric light. She did not smile. "You're lucky you're not dead," she said. Daniel turned. "I figured. You insulted the queen. Do you even understand what you did?" "Yes," he said calmly. "I said no." Thalra looked at him like he was a puzzle with missing pieces. "I've seen kings beg to be in your place. You were offered the chance to be father to the royal heir. Wealth, status, protection. But not freedom," Daniel replied. "And not respect." Thalra's expression changed slightly, just enough to show surprise. Then, without another word, she handed him a small black card. "What is this?" he asked. "Your schedule for the trial of fire." Daniel looked at her. "Trial of fire? You have been challenged. If you survive, you prove your worth. If you fail, your bones will be fed to the roots of this palace." The next morning, the arena buzzed with noise. It was carved into the heart of the palace itself, a giant ring of glowing rock and shifting platforms. Thousands of Xerexans gathered, their eyes fixed on the center where Daniel stood, alone. Opposite him, 3 alien warriors entered, each one chosen by the High Council. The first was a Kranak brute with armor fused to his skin. The second, a sleek assassin from the Solari moon. The third, a 6-legged beast with eyes that glowed orange. Queen Valen entered last, sitting on her high throne above the arena. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. But her eyes watched Daniel very closely. A loud voice announced the rules. "You must survive 3 trials: force, speed, and mind. Failure in any one means death." Drums pounded. The first trial began. The Krenak warrior charged like a boulder. Daniel rolled to the side, barely missing a massive swing. Instead of fighting strength with strength, Daniel dodged, using the alien's own weight against him. After a few minutes, the Krenak fell face first into a pit of fire, roaring with shame. Gasps filled the air. He beat the Krenak, without even hitting him. The second trial came fast. The Solari assassin vanished into shadows, appearing behind Daniel in flashes. But Daniel used sound, throwing broken metal to distract her movements. Then he used a trap, one of the arena's moving plates, to trap her in a force field. Time ran out. He survived again, even more gasps. Impossible. No human can do that. The queen leaned forward now. The third trial was different. A giant puzzle of shifting stairs and doors formed in the middle of the arena. Daniel had to solve it while the six-legged beast chased him. Traps triggered, walls moved, but Daniel, clever and fast, mapped the pattern quickly. He jumped over the last wall just before the beast slammed into it and was knocked unconscious. The arena fell silent. Then, cheers. Even some of the Queen's elite guards looked impressed. Hours later, Queen Valen sat alone in her throne room. Her fingers tapped the armrest again. She stared at the screen showing a replay of Daniel's performance. He was smarter than they thought. Calmer, more resourceful, and somehow, she couldn't stop watching. Why? She whispered to herself. Why do you make me question everything? In a hidden chamber, the political council gathered again. He must not survive the next trial, one of them hissed. His presence is dividing the palace, said another. Then we use the old law, suggested a third. Yes, if the queen refuses to punish him, we will. A plan had begun. Daniel had won the arena. But now he was in real danger. Trial by fire. Daniel woke up before sunrise. His room inside the Xerexan palace was beautiful. Glass walls that shimmered like stars, soft lights that changed with his breath, and a bed that adjusted to his body. But even with all that luxury, he didn't sleep well. His body ached, not from pain, but from tension. Today he would face the final trial. Not one of strength or mind, but of spirit. He stood and looked out the window. Far below, the people of Xerexa were gathering again, moving through the glowing streets like rivers of light. Everyone was talking about the human who defied the queen, the human who didn't kneel, the human who survived the trials, and now, the one who might become a legend. In another part of the palace, Queen Valen stood before her private mirror. Her servants adjusted her armor, elegant and regal, made of dark crystal and golden threads. But her mind was somewhere else. Her eyes kept drifting to the screen beside her, replaying footage of Daniel, dodging the Krenak, outsmarting the assassin, solving the puzzle while the six-legged beast chased him. No hesitation. No panic. There was something about him, something dangerous and yet magnetic. An advisor entered. Your Majesty, the council has chosen the final trial. Valen turned. What is it? The mirror path. Valen froze. That's not for outsiders, they insisted, and invoked the ancient code. If he refuses the path, he forfeits his life. And if he accepts... The advisor didn't finish. Valen's eyes narrowed. They want him to fail. The arena was different this time. There were no crowds, no guards, just a single path stretching forward through a glowing forest inside the palace walls. Strange trees made of silver leaves, floating stones, and above them a quiet blue mist. Daniel stood at the edge, facing a massive archway carved with ancient Xerexan symbols. The queen appeared beside him, quiet and still. This is the mirror path, she said. Once you step through, no one can help you, not me, not the guards, not even time itself. Daniel looked ahead. What's inside? Yourself, Valen replied. Your fears, your regrets, your truth. Daniel said nothing. Valen stepped closer. You can walk away. I can end this now. You'll be sent back to Earth. No shame, no punishment. He turned to her. Why are you offering me a way out now? Her voice softened, just a little. Because I'm not sure who this trial is really for, you or me. Daniel smiled. Then I guess we'll both find out. And he walked forward. As soon as Daniel passed through the arch, everything changed. The glowing forest darkened. The mist thickened. and strange whispers filled the air, not in alien language, but in English. His own voice, old memories, his mother's voice calling him home as a boy, his commander's voice shouting during his first space mission, a woman's voice, one he hadn't heard in years. Anna. He moved slowly through the trees, and one by one illusions appeared. First, a version of himself in chains, kneeling before the queen. "Why fight?" the chained version said. "They feed you. They protect you. Just obey." Daniel walked past. Next he saw himself as a king, sitting on the Zerexan throne with alien women around him, gold on his shoulders, and a false smile on his face. "You could have all this," the illusion whispered. "You could rule galaxies." Daniel clenched his fists. "I don't want power. I want purpose." He moved on. Then came the hardest image. He saw Anna, his former lover, the one he left behind on Earth. She stood in front of him, eyes full of tears. "You always walk away, Daniel," she said. "When will you stay and fight for something real?" Daniel dropped to his knees. This one cut deeper than all the rest. "I didn't know how," he whispered. But now, he did. He stood, walked forward, and the forest melted away. Outside the path, Queen Valen waited alone. It had been 3 hours, maybe more. Most who entered the mirror path never came back, but just when her doubts began to rise, a ripple tore through the archway, and Daniel stepped out. He was pale, breathing hard, and his eyes held something new. Not fear, not pride. Truth. The Queen stared at him. He didn't bow. He didn't speak. He just stood, taller. Back in the council chamber, the political leaders watched the feed in silence. "He survived," one hissed. "This is getting dangerous." "She's softening," said another. "Then we act," whispered Lord Kranos. "We don't wait for her to give him the throne. We end this tonight." Later that evening, Daniel stood at the balcony of his chamber. The twin moons hung low, casting silver across the floor. A gentle breeze carried the scent of alien flowers. Behind him, the door creaked open. He turned quickly. Commander Thalra entered, her face serious. "You're not safe," she said. "What do you mean?" "They're planning something. A coup, maybe. They want you out of the picture." "And the Queen? They might move against her too." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" Thalra looked him in the eye. "Because I believe in you, and maybe, so does she." The night was no longer calm. The Zerexan Empire stood on the edge of chaos. Daniel had passed every trial. A queen's conflict. The palace of Zerexa shimmered under the weight of tension, beneath its glowing towers and silent halls. Something dangerous was spreading doubt. Not from the people, not from outsiders, but from within the royal heart itself. Queen Valen, once known across 10 systems as unshakable, now stood in front of her reflection, unmoving. Her armor was polished, her crown perfectly set, but her mind was storming. The human, Daniel, had survived everything. He had defeated warriors, outsmarted assassins, walked the mirror path, and returned alive. But what disturbed her most wasn't his strength. It was the fact that she believed in him, and that belief made her feel weak. "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" she whispered to herself. Behind her, a voice broke the silence. "Your Majesty." It was Lord Kranos, bowing with his usual stiffness. He was the leader of the High Military Council, and his loyalty was legendary. Until now. "The Council is concerned," he said carefully. "Concerned?" Valen repeated coldly. "Yes. The people are talking. They say you allow a human to mock our laws. That you are enchanted." Valen's eyes narrowed. "I have tested him. He has passed." "You tested him with games," Kranos snapped. "But now, he walks freely, speaks to commanders, influences your thoughts. If this continues, You will not just lose their respect, you will lose your throne. Valen stepped down from the platform and stood inches from his face. Is that a warning, Krynos? He didn't blink. It is a truth. That night, Valen left her chambers with no guards. Wearing a long cloak, she passed through hidden tunnels that ran beneath the palace, old passages from wars long past. She found Daniel in the training hall, alone. He was shirtless, sweat dripping down his back as he moved through combat drills designed for Zerexan warriors. He moved like water. No wasted energy, no fear. She watched him quietly for a while. He finally noticed her and stopped, breathing hard. You're not wearing a crown tonight, he said. And you're not pretending to be weak, she replied. They stood in silence for a moment. Why did you come? He asked. Valen looked around the dark chamber. I don't know. Maybe to ask you a question. Then ask, what do you want, Daniel? Power? A seat beside me? Influence? Daniel walked over, picked up a cloth, and wiped his face. None of those. Then why are you still here? Because you're changing, he said softly. And that means this place might change too. Valen blinked, surprised. Do you want me to change it? She asked. No, he replied. I want you to choose it. Hours later, Queen Valen sat alone in the royal chamber. In front of her was the old law book, thick and ancient, filled with rules that had shaped Zerexa for generations. Page after page spoke of dominance, control, and legacy, but nowhere did it speak of partnership. A soft knock echoed. Enter, she said. Commander Thalra stepped in, her face tense. Your Majesty, it's urgent. Valen stood up immediately. What is it? The council has moved. They have declared you compromised. Compromised? Yes. They claim your emotional weakness endangers the Empire. They have triggered the code of severance. At sunrise, they will strip you of the throne unless you denounce the human and exile him. Valen's heart thundered. How dare they? It gets worse. Thalra continued. They've mobilized elite units. If you refuse the order, they may try to take you by force. Valen's voice was ice. Then let them try. Sunrise came fast. The throne room was filled. Council members, noble lords, elite guards, and distant planetary ambassadors all stood in silent tension. Queen Valin entered, wearing ceremonial armor laced with firestone, her eyes glowing with sharp fury. Behind her walked Daniel, calm, silent, wearing nothing royal but standing taller than anyone in the room. Lord Krynos stood. Your Majesty, this is no longer your court to command, he declared. We invoke the code of severance. By law, you must now declare your loyalty to Zerexa's traditions or step down. The room held its breath. Valen looked around, her gaze hard. I know what the law says, she said, but I also know what this empire has become. Afraid of change. You confuse fear with honor, Krynos growled. Do I? She turned to the people. For cycles, we forced others to bend. We made contracts instead of connections, and we called it strength. But strength without heart is weakness, in disguise. Many aliens in the crowd looked away. This human, she pointed to Daniel, has done what none of you dared, stood for his own worth, even in my presence. He has passed every trial, not for power, not for fame, but because he believes in something better. He is not Zerexan, Krynos shouted. He does not belong on that floor. Daniel finally spoke. I didn't come to steal your throne, he said. I came because someone strong enough to crush me chose not to. That's real power, and it doesn't come from a crown. A hush fell over the court. Queen Valen stepped forward. I will not exile him, she declared, and I will not step down. Then you defy the council? Krynos growled. No, she said calmly. I replace it. Gasps. From her side, Commander Thalra stepped forward and drew her blade. Behind her, half the palace guard joined. The hall exploded with noise. Some drew weapons. Others backed away. Daniel stepped between Valen and the chaos. "Don't," he said. "Not like this." Valen nodded. "I agree." And then she raised her voice. "Those who believe in fear, leave this place. Those who believe in a new Zurexa, stand with me." The room trembled, and one by one, they chose. Some left, angrily, but many stayed. Nobles, scientists, soldiers. A new court was forming, right in front of them. Late that night, Valen stood alone on the palace balcony. Daniel joined her. "You didn't have to fight for me," he said. "I wasn't." She replied, "I fought for the me I want to become." For the first time she smiled, not a royal smile, not a guarded one, a real one. The broken throne room. Too quiet. A place once full of music, orders, and praises now echoed with something colder, uncertainty. Gone were the council members who once ruled with pride. Gone were the old laws carved into the floor. Now Queen Valen stood in the center alone, looking at her shattered reflection in a polished wall. The glass hadn't cracked by accident. It was thrown by her own hand. Because in that moment, she realized that for the first time in her reign, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. Outside, the Zurexan capital boiled. Half of the city celebrated the Queen's bold speech, calling it the beginning of a new era. They chanted Daniel's name, decorated the streets with stars and torches, and spoke of freedom, for humans and Zurexans alike. But the other half was burning with rage. Militant houses, ancient bloodlines, and rogue generals whispered behind closed doors. To them, Valen had lost her right to rule. And Daniel, he was not a hero. He was a virus. Far below the palace, in a forgotten bunker lit only by red emergency lights, General Krenos sat in silence with a group of traitorous commanders. A hologram floated above the table. Queen Valen, standing beside Daniel, giving her speech of change. "She replaced the council," Krenos growled. "She invited the human to speak before our people. And now she thinks she can rewrite our history?" A female commander nodded. "The soldiers are splitting. Some follow her, others stay quiet." "Then it's time to act," Krenos said. "What will you do?" "We take the throne room by force, we remove her, and we make the people see what happens when rulers forget who they are." The plan was in motion, a silent coup. That same night, Queen Valen walked alone through the old section of the palace. What once served as a hall of kings, now covered in dust and old symbols. Daniel followed a few steps behind, saying nothing. "This place," she whispered. "I haven't walked here in years." "Why now?" he asked. "Because sometimes to build something new you have to stand where the old once ruled." She stopped and turned to him. "Do you ever think you made a mistake coming here?" Daniel shook his head. "No, but I didn't come to change your people. I came because I believed in you." Those words struck something deep inside her. A silence followed, and then an explosion. Far above them. They both turned sharply. The palace trembled. Daniel pulled her to cover as dust fell from the ceiling. Alarms began to scream. Then came the voice of Thalra, echoing through a palace-wide channel. "Emergency protocol. Hostile takeover in progress. Hostile forces have breached the main floor. Repeat. Enemies in the throne room." Valen's eyes went wide. They've come for it. Above them, the throne room was under siege. Krenos led the attack himself, dressed in black battle gear, eyes glowing with fury. His elite soldiers stormed the chamber, destroying symbols of the new rule. They smashed the golden symbols of change, tore down banners, flipped the royal throne itself. "Record this," Krenos barked. "The people will see the Queen's fall." A small droid hovered, broadcasting everything live. Daniel and Valen raced through the tunnels. They emerged from the side of the throne room, hidden by a narrow wall. Thalra met them, sword drawn. "They control the platform," she hissed. "And they've jammed half the guards. We're outnumbered." Valen looked at Daniel. "You don't have to fight," he nodded. "But I will." They stepped out into The open Krynos turned, surprised. "You should have run," he sneered. "You should have listened," Valen replied. He raised his weapon. "This is your last chance. Denounce the human, declare the council's rule, or fall." Valen walked forward slowly, her voice steady. "I choose something better." And then, it happened. Chaos. Blades clashed, lasers fired, screams echoed. Daniel moved like lightning, dodging plasma blasts and knocking two soldiers unconscious. Thalra fought beside him, blocking attacks with perfect precision. "Valen?" She headed straight for Krynos. He met her with fury. Their blades clashed in a storm of energy and sparks. "You were once a real queen," Krynos snarled. "And you were once a real soldier," she shot back. Their fight was brutal, not just strength against strength, but will against fear. Daniel saw her falter once, just for a second, and then Krynos raised his blade, ready to finish her. Daniel threw a dagger. It struck Krynos' shoulder, throwing him off balance. Valen moved like lightning and knocked him flat. Guards rushed in. The traitors surrendered. It was over. The throne room was a disaster. Smoke, blood, broken symbols. But something new filled the air. Silence. And respect. Valen stood, wounded but proud, and looked at Daniel. "You saved me." "No," he said. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you who you are." She looked around at the wreckage. "We'll rebuild it," she said. "Not just the room. The empire." "With walls?" Daniel asked. She smiled faintly. "With truth." Later that night, she sat on the broken steps of the old throne. No crown. No armor. Daniel sat beside her, quiet. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a fresh document. The same silver parchment, but different words. She handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "A contract," she said. "Not for heirs, not for service, just for partnership. You choose." Daniel read the words carefully. This time it spoke of choice, honor, and equal rule. He looked at her and nodded. He didn't kneel. He simply stood beside her. And that was enough. The queen must kneel. The Zurexan palace no longer whispered with doubt. It shouted with change. But, in the shadows, war still brewed. Even after Queen Valen defeated the coup, even after she reclaimed the throne beside Daniel, not everyone was ready to accept a human standing as her equal. Across the outer systems, ancient families and loyalist warlords gathered. Some called it treason, others called it weakness, but none dared say it to her face. Yet one did. His name was Lord Tiravax, a warlord from the outer worlds, a man with molten skin, a voice like thunder, and an army that had never lost. When news reached him that Queen Valen had torn down the old reproductive contract, allowed a human to challenge tradition, and even gave him equal power, Tiravax made his decision he would challenge her rule publicly, in combat, in front of all worlds, and he would make her kneel before everyone. Inside the palace, Daniel stood in the royal garden, sunlight streaking through violet trees, but peace was far from his face. Commander Thalra approached with urgency. "We just received the broadcast." "What kind of broadcast?" "A challenge. From Tiravax." Daniel narrowed his eyes. A fight? Not just a fight. A ceremonial war trial. The last one was over a century ago. He wants the queen to face him. No weapons. No guards. Just one-on-one. And if she refuses, then the empire will fracture. People will call her a coward, and everything we built will fall. Hours later, in the war chamber, Queen Valen stood before a massive screen. On it, Tiravax's face glared. Fire burned behind him. Soldiers cheered in the background. "You've forgotten who you are," he barked. "Zurexans do not share power. We take it. You want peace with a soft creature? Fine. But do it on your knees. Face me in the arena, or surrender your crown." Valen turned to Daniel. He was silent. Then he said, "You don't have to prove anything." Valen looked out the window at the glowing city. Yes, I do. Not to him. To them. To us. The ancient arena was prepared. Not the one inside the palace, but the first arena built before the empire itself, carved into the bones of a mountain. Every system in the empire sent ships. Millions watched live. It wasn't just a fight, it was history. Daniel stood in the queen's tent, helping her prepare. Her armor was simpler now, light, flexible, and without the crown. "He'll try to break you," he said. Valen nodded. "Then I'll let him try." "Don't forget who you are." "I won't," she said. "I'm not fighting for pride. I'm fighting for choice." She stepped into the arena. The crowd roared. On the opposite side, Tiravax entered like a god of war. Horns blared. His armor glowed red. His fists were larger than Daniel's chest. A bell rang. They approached. "Last chance to surrender, Queen," Tiravax growled. Valen smiled coldly. "You talk too much." And the fight began. He was faster than he looked, rushing her with earth-shaking power. She dodged, danced, rolled. Every blow he missed cracked the stone beneath them. But Valen wasn't just avoiding. She was learning. The crowd gasped as she ducked a heavy strike and drove her knee into his side. He growled and slammed her to the ground. Daniel stood up from the royal box, eyes locked on her. Valen rose, blood on her lip, and laughed. "Is that it?" she shouted. "You're just another angry man who thinks might is right?" Tiravax roared and charged again. This time she caught his arm, flipped him over her shoulder, and used his weight against him, just like Daniel once did in his trial. The audience gasped. She struck, again and again, until Tiravax was on one knee, panting, shocked. You can't defeat me," he spat. "I already have," Valen said. "Not with fists, with will." And then, before the entire galaxy, Queen Valen walked away. She did not finish him, and that was her victory. The silence after the fight was heavier than any roar. Valen returned to the royal platform, but something unexpected happened as she stood before the galaxy. Bloodied, bruised, but unbowed, she turned and knelt in front of Daniel. Gasps. Even Daniel's breath caught. "Why?" he whispered. She looked up at him. "Because this throne doesn't rise on domination anymore. It rises on respect, and you earned mine." Daniel pulled her up. "Then we rise together." He turned to the crowd and lifted her hand high. From the stars, from distant colonies, from ancient planets. The people cheered, not just for their queen, for their future. Later, in the stillness of the palace, Valen sat beside Daniel. No crown between them. "We may have won today," she said, "but it won't be the last challenge." Daniel smiled. "Then let them come. And what if one day I fall?" Daniel took her hand. "Then I'll be there to remind you how you rose." A new legacy. The galaxy had changed, not with an explosion, not with a war, but with a single moment, when Queen Valen knelt before a human, and the crowd didn't riot. They didn't rebel. They rose with her. The image traveled faster than light. It became a symbol. It was shared on every world, played on every screen. Statues were built, not of domination, but of partnership, of two figures standing side by side, not one above the other, but not all were pleased. In the darkness beyond the mapped stars, the old rulers watched with hatred. They had waited in silence for centuries, rejected by the empire, hiding in exiled systems, keeping their traditions alive through violence and secrecy. And now they wanted revenge. 3 weeks after the arena, the Zurexan capital was alive with celebration. A new council had formed. Half of it was made up of people from outside the nobility, scientists, workers, soldiers, teachers. A human was on the council too. Daniel, now called the Bridge of Two Worlds. But Daniel didn't seek a title. He spent his days helping rebuild, training palace guards, mentoring young leaders, eating with the common people. And Queen Valen, she was still queen, but different. She walked the city with no guards. She spoke to the public directly. She even laughed. and that frightened the enemies who lurked in the dark. On the 41st day of peace, an unmarked ship arrived. It carried no flag, no signature, no warning. It simply hovered above the palace with eerie silence. Then, a message was broadcast across every frequency. We are the forgotten blood. We watched you bend the knee to weakness. Now we come to break the chain of softness. Surrender your throne, or your stars will burn. Panic spread. Palace alarms rang. The royal guard scrambled. Daniel and Valen stood together on the main balcony as the ship began charging its weapon. They mean it, Daniel said. Valen nodded. They want to erase the new world before it grows. Too strong. Then we don't give them the chance. Deep within the palace walls, an ancient defense system had been locked for ages, an orbital cannon system tied to the very throne's energy core. No ruler had dared use it since it was built, fearing it would destroy not just the enemy but the very skies above the capital. If we fire it, Thalra said, we risk atmospheric collapse. And if we don't? Daniel asked. They'll blast us from orbit. The room went quiet. Then Valen stepped forward. What if we board them instead? The others stared at her. You want to go to the ship? Thalra asked. Yes, not as invaders, not as attackers, but as something they won't expect. As what? Daniel said. Valen looked at him. As the leaders they fear, together. The plan was mad, but they did it anyway. A stealth ship was launched, small, silent, and cloaked. Inside were just 4 people, Valen, Daniel, Thalra, and a single pilot. They boarded through a maintenance vent and moved through tight metallic corridors. The forgotten blood had filled the ship with guards, but not many. They didn't expect a counterattack. They expected surrender. They were wrong. Daniel moved like wind, disabling traps, knocking out guards with precise strikes. Valen followed, disarming weapons, planting signal scramblers. Thalra hacked the central core. Finally, they reached the command bridge. Lord Vorn, the leader of the Forgotten Blood, stood there, half machine, half alien, his body stitched from ancient tech and scars. He turned slowly. The queen and her pet, he said. Daniel didn't flinch. Still standing. Not for long. Vorn raised his arm, a glowing cannon forming from his shoulder. But Valen was faster. She shot first, not at him, but at the control panel behind him, sending sparks flying. The ship shook violently. Emergency lights blared. You're crashing us. Vorn screamed. No, she said calmly. I'm resetting your targeting. You won't hurt anyone today. Vorn lunged, but Daniel caught him mid-leap. They fought with brutal strength. Fists, elbows, metal striking flesh. Balin joined and, together they brought Vorn down. Back on the surface, the people watched as the ship above them trembled, then slowly, powered down. No destruction, no collapse, just silence. Then came a new broadcast. The Queen and her partner have boarded the invader. The threat is neutralized. The city is safe. The future remains. The people didn't just cheer, they believed. In the days that followed, the last members of the Forgotten Blood were captured or fled to the dark corners of space. Peace was declared again, but this time it felt stronger. It wasn't forced. It was chosen. The palace changed. The throne room was rebuilt not with stone, but with crystal and light, open to the sky, where anyone could enter. A new law was written. No being shall be bound by bloodline or power. All shall rule together if they rule with heart. Daniel was offered a crown. He refused. Valen was offered absolute power. She reformed it. Instead, they both chose to be first among equals. On the first anniversary of the arena duel, Valen stood before the galaxy once more. We built this empire with control, she said, but we will grow it with understanding. And for that we needed a mirror to show us what we became. Daniel was that mirror. And from that reflection, we rose. She looked to her side. He stood there. No crown, no armor, just him. Not as conquerors, he added, but as co-creators. Somewhere on a distant world, a young alien girl watched the speech. She turned to her mother. "Mama, are humans real?" The mother smiled. "Yes. And once, one of them made our queen kneel. Not with power, but with truth." Final scene. Late at night, Daniel and Valen stood on the palace balcony. The stars above were calm. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "how this would have ended if you had signed that first contract?" Daniel chuckled. "You mean the one where I was just a seed donor with royal breakfast?" "Yes." He turned to her. "Then I would have been forgotten. And you would never have found your voice." She looked at him softly. "Thank you for tearing it." He smiled. "Thank you for letting me." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. They simply stood side by side, rulers not by force but by choice. And far above, the stars finally felt at peace. The end.